and we need to account for that. Really, the unsung hero in building energy consumption or energy efficiency measures is actually is feedback and managed behavioural change, we call it. And from the point of view of the commercial sector, there are substantial savings that are available by having trained facility managers who are trained in energy efficiency and given the power to make decisions and actually change things from an energy point of view, plus the availability of feedback, real-time feedback through energy management systems, which are given fairly sensible reporting output. We think you can achieve in the order of 20 to 30% energy savings with no capital works expenditure. From a residential point of view, similar opportunities available with the introduction of smart meters, which is happening in at least Victoria and New South Wales and Western Australia, is that the incorporation of in-home displays and web portals which allow customers to monitor their energy consumption on a real-time basis and benchmark themselves against their own energy use plus the energy use of their neighbours could in the end provide another opportunity of about 15% reduction in energy consumption. In Victoria, the energy supply company, or any distribution network company, Gemini, has already got a web portal service that is available to log into smart meters, and people are using it and getting this information. So when we add all those things up for a residential, for our Melbourne house, we are looking at in the order of a 70 to 80% reduction in energy demand. And that's a similar value that is reflected across other regions, climate zones, although it's not quite as great as it is in Melbourne based on the fact that the large space heating component in Victoria's energy consumption. For a Brisbane office, which is the one on the left, we think we can get in the order of 77% reduction. And again, that actually is fairly climate independent. We think we can fairly easily get a 70% reduction in a lot of office buildings by doing those fairly simple things I mentioned before. And then for shopping centres is in the order of 74%, 75%. Just lastly, last few slides, I'll have to skip through this a bit, but we did some serious analysis looking at how much rooftop PV capacity is there in Australia. And based on that analysis, I won't go into detail, but we think we have in the order of 30 to 35 gigawatts capacity of rooftop solar PV, which in Australia we currently have about 1,500. So there's a substantial increase. And this gives us in the order of where Germany's at the moment, about 30,000 megawatts of PV. We worked with Vipac to do some analysis on micro wind, and that found in Melbourne, for the CBD, that there were 36 buildings that were viable for micro wind, with the possibility of 1 to 20 5 kilowatt turbines being situated on those buildings, which would generate in the order of 2,280 megawatt hours per annum, which is about 15% of the City of Melbourne's energy consumption. So it's quite substantial, although it's still fairly limited opportunity. This is a really scary diagram, so I won't go into detail about it, but basically we're doing stuff to the distribution network to enable that large amount of distributed energy, and it comes out about $16 billion to do all that. So for residential, we're being able to go from, in 2011, from about 210 petajoules of electricity use, 126 petajoules of gas, 6.8 petajoules of LPG, and 39.2 petajoules of wood usage, down to 0 petajoules of gas, 0 petajoules of LPG, and 149 petajoules of electricity. So we can cut out all that gas usage and not increase the amount of electricity we need to supply to houses. So there's a net reduction in energy consumption. So we're 55% lower in residential. We're doing a bit more work on that, but if you cut out the wood, ignore the wood side, wood component to that equation, it's even further reduction. For commercial, we still number crunching, but this is our building stock analysis that we've basically been building fairly comprehensive assessment of Australia's building stock, both in terms of the floor area and energy consumption. And we think this will be one of the most up-to-date bodies of information out there on this issue. There is another study being done for the Department of Climate Change and Energy Efficiency at the moment, and we've been working with Pitt and Sherry and Bistrapnel, who've been involved in that project as well. But retail and offices are really a major area of concern. Plus food retail is another, accommodation, so we've been looking at those areas, but we've predominantly decided to focus on offices, retail, and education. So just sort of to sum up, I guess people here are probably aware of it, but I guess there's a big discussion happening at the moment in the building industry about whether or not we go down the path of using gas for our tri-generation systems in our buildings or at a precinct level, and in our view we could go in another direction, which is invest the money we would otherwise spend in tri-generation in both reducing the demand of our energy buildings and also adding on-site energy generation, renewable energy generation in the form of solar PV and possibly some micro wind. But what's not considered in that discussion about the tri-generation option is that, yes, it has a low emissions profile from the point of view of combustion when compared with black and brown coal, but what's not factored into those equations is all the fugitive emissions that happen in the process of producing that gas, both offshore and onshore, and as it piped into the city. There was a study in Wyoming that looked at one coal seam gas field and found that 15% of the entire volume of the gas field was being vented to the atmosphere. That's an enormous amount of methane, which has a substantial global warming potential when compared to CO2 over a 20-year lifetime. So this is not factored in that equation, and we really think it ought to be. Secondly, there's a bit of misinformation out there, and here's an example of it. This is Clover Moore, the Mayor of City Sydney, who says that Trigen can't run off coal seam methane. It would be like filling a petrol car with diesel. Well, unfortunately, the difficult truth is that the majority of Australia's future production levels in natural gas, methane, is going to come from coal seam gas. So any increase in commercial gas usage, which the City of Sydney plan will look at increasing gas usage by 17 petajoules, which is an enormous amount, that 17 petajoules will invariably come from coal seam gas and shale gases and other unconventional gas sources. And it can be used and will be used in tri-generation plants. It's going to go down the same pipeways and you're not going to know either way. So it's increasing the demand for domestic gas from unconventional sources. Just the last two slides. Really, this is some analysis we did at the City of Sydney plan for precinct level tri-generation. And what we came to the conclusion of is when you take a building and actually either supply its energy and cooling and hot water demand with a tri-generation system, or you could, from an opportunity cost point of view, you could spend that money on something else. So if you spend that money on a combined cycle gas turbine, which is what you see on the right-hand side, and just generate electricity, so it's a remote combined cycle gas turbine generating electricity, supplying a building with an efficient water-cooled vapor compression chiller, versus a less efficient absorption chiller, which has maybe a coefficient of performance at 1/10 the amount of the vapor compression chiller, that when you factor in all the losses that happen through pumping around the district, and the fact you can only use the sort of the water, the hot water coming out of your gas plant, your system with a tri-generation precinct system is only 58% efficient from taking a molecule of energy or 100 molecules of energy in the gas and delivering that energy to the building, whereas the combined cycle gas turbine option is 73% efficient. So it's more efficient to spend the money on remote combined cycle gas turbines than it is to install precinct level tri-generation plant and absorption chillers. And also, we're not necessarily in favour of that option. We think we should go for the renewables option. And when you consider the fact there's no losses through your renewables, you're getting 132% efficiency. And from the emissions point of view, your 18.5 tonnes of CO2 being produced in that process is more than you'd need in your combined cycle gas turbine, will be produced in your combined cycle gas turbine, and obviously more than the zero you get from powering with renewables. This is not something that's being discussed widely. But on the flip side is that solar PV saves us money, which is not the argument that we're being heard in the mainstream media. It's costly, it's oversubscribed, all those sorts of things. But what this shows, this is some analysis that our researchers at the Melbourne Energy Institute did. They looked at a thing called merit order effect, and that basically addresses the impact of knocking out peak events by having distributed solar PV across rooftops in different places in Australia. And so you can sort of see the grey bits as kind of the demand over a period of a couple of days, so it goes up and down. What happens with the yellow, orange and red is that with that amount of PV, 1 gigawatt, 3 gigawatts or 5 gigawatts, you're shaving off a chunk of those peaks, which would otherwise be made up with an open cycle gas turbine. So a peaking plant would have to switch on, sell its power at a very high expensive amount. The retailers would have to buy that power and pass on that cost to consumers. Whereas if they don't have to buy that power, they actually can avoid a substantial impost. And that's the demand side, but from a price point of view, those orange, yellow and red bits are the amount of money that is not having to be spent. It's significant. And we found that at 5 gigawatts of PV, it's in the order of $600 million. So across the national energy market, there's a saving of $600 million for PV.